Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Paint Branch High School. My name is Thomas Taylor. We're glad that you could join us this evening in this very large auditorium for our very intimate conversation together. I want to thank you for giving up part of your evening, especially at the dinner hour on a beautiful, beautiful fall night to spend some time together. We really just have an hour together, so I want to make the most of our time. And the good news about being a small and intimate crowd is that there's lots of time to hear from you. As the new school superintendent, it's pretty typical for superintendents or really any leader to kind of have a game plan about how they get to know the community and how they get to know different elements of the school system when they come in. And they typically create an entry plan, and that entry plan is usually somewhere in the neighborhood of 90 to 100 days. The entry plan that I created is a 6-month entry plan because Montgomery County is a pretty big place. And I grew up in Montgomery County. I graduated from Montgomery County schools. I attended Montgomery County schools my entire childhood. And like every good Montgomery County student, I was so inspired to go out and change the world that I left Montgomery County and spent my entire childhood trying to go out and explore, and my entire adulthood trying to come back. So needless to say, my mother is very thrilled that I've returned to Montgomery County, and I'm not sure if my brother is, but that's how that goes, right? I do want to talk a little bit about our county this evening and a little bit about my leadership style. And then I want to hear from you about some of your priorities and some of the things that are important to you. And that's really what the focus of tonight is. I have a couple of guests with me this evening. We have an interpreter for ASL. If you require interpretation, I would invite you to come up to the front so that you can have a good view of our interpretation this evening. Yes, and we have Spanish interpretation as well, and that's in the back. So we are filming tonight right over here. Our good friends at MCPS-MD are also filming, and they are also filming and broadcasting, and we'll put a little bit of a recording together, both in English and in Spanish as well. So that many folks can access this, and we'll try to get this summarized as well. Notes from tonight will also be posted online, and we'll get to that in a second. So a little bit of housekeeping stuff, and then we're going to get rolling for this evening. The first bit of housekeeping is that if you brought a smartphone with you, we'd love to collect some information from you about you. The reason that we are doing this is that when we collect questions, when we collect data points, we kind of want to know who's hanging out with us for the evening and making sure that we get representation from across the county and different parts of the county in a really meaningful way. These sessions haven't been super well attended in the past, and that's okay. Tonight, they're not super well attended, but this is a great opportunity for us to talk and for us to get to know one another, and also for me to know a little bit more about the things that are pressing or in the back of your mind. So I'll give a few seconds for folks. If you want to take a snapshot, you can even do this at home if you just take a picture. And if you don't feel comfortable doing this or you don't want to do this, that's okay too. We're just delighted that you're here this evening, and we're looking forward to the opportunity to chat. If you're having trouble connecting to the internet, we do have the MCPS guest internet connection via Wi-Fi if that's something that you need as well. We do have a short survey that's also connected to this event this evening as well. All right, well, thank you so much. The next QR code, because we love a good QR code, is just actually a website. And it goes to entryplan.mcpsmd.org. And on that website, you're going to see a whole host of things. You're going to see the handout that you got this evening. You're also going to see a list of different events that I've been to and a list of different events that I plan to go to engage with folks in the community. You'll also see copies of the recording from tonight, as well as copies of recordings from previous events that we've had. One of the things that I hope comes through in our conversation today is that transparency and integrity are really important to me. And as critical components of that, we have to kind of put stuff out there, even some things that we're not really comfortable about, or even some things that we are maybe concerned about. The only thing that I mention in regard to that is that if you have comments that are specific to you or specific to a specific situation and you're not comfortable with those being put on the internet, you may want to hold your comments and talk to me about it later or shoot me an email because this will be kind of put on the internet. So that's my full disclosure for tonight. Okay. Just very briefly, a little bit about what I hope to bring to Montgomery County. This is outlined in the handout that you received, and a little bit about the kind of leadership that I hope to bring to Montgomery County. As I mentioned before, transparency and integrity are pretty much cornerstones of my existence and cornerstones of my leadership. I hope that is what we build our future on. I also hope to return a focus of the school system back to students and what they need. Performance in Montgomery County on academic measures is not great. It's actually pretty terrible. If I'm going to get hyper-specific, in literacy and in mathematics, it is even really troubling to see some of our performance data. If you cut that even some more, our populations of color and our students with disabilities and those that are learning the English language that are a part of our school community are struggling the most. There's a lot of work to do. We have challenges with our attendance. We have challenges maintaining a positive learning environment. We have a whole host of challenges that we're going to confront as a school system and as a community together. And I really do believe that it takes all of us working together for us to solve some of these challenges. So you'll see, as part of my leadership, I hope to really lift up a lot of voices, and in particular, voices that have been historically marginalized. I grew up in Montgomery County, as I mentioned before, and even then I could tell you that there were inequities in Montgomery County, that the education that I got in Silver Spring and in Bethesda was very different than the education that my peers got in Damascus or in Gaithersburg or in Germantown. I knew that then as a high school student. Not a whole lot has changed in the 30, 35 years since then. So there's a lot of things that we need to confront together to make sure that our kids have that MCPS experience that everybody thinks that they get in some other parts of the county, and we need to make sure that that's a reality for all kids. So with that, this is really what I'm about, and I think it's important that you know that. So we're going to jump right in. There is the last QR code, I promise, of the evening. This is really an opportunity, and I've got 2 microphones set up, even though everyone's kind of gravitated right here to this center, that if you don't get a chance to say what you want to say tonight, but you do want to make sure that your comments get across, this QR code is literally just asking those 2 questions. And what I'm going to invite you to do in a minute is just to come up and share some thoughts and to share some of your responses to these 2 prompts. And you can pick which one you want to respond to, or you can respond to both, or you can respond to none and just say what you want to say. That's quite all right with me too. The first one has to do with our operations, how we operate as a school system. Now, as a school system, we have the largest restaurant chain in Montgomery County. We have 211 restaurants. They are called schools, and we welcome you in our schools. But that's a big thing. Well, what are we doing well with our operations? What seems to be working well? This is the part where you jump up and you say, "Oh, I'm so happy with my kid's bus being on time every morning." That was a joke. I know your kid's bus isn't on time every morning. It doesn't happen, but that's okay. But it's important for us to know that. And what needs attention. And from an academic standpoint, what should be done differently to improve our results? One of the best things, since the majority of the folks in this room are adults, I'm going to make an assumption that you either were a student or you're the parent of a student or you know a student and you have some very strong ideas about what could make our academic environment better. And I kind of want to hear from you on that. So this is the part where I stop talking and I start listening, and I want to hear from you. So if you've got some thoughts, come on up. I've got a microphone right here. Let's talk for a second. And while you're doing that, I'm going to make a special introduction. Because every time one of my bosses comes in, I gotta make sure that everybody knows about that, and she's shaking her head. For those of you who don't know Brenda Wolf actually represents this part of Montgomery County on the Board of Education. Thank you. So we're thrilled that you're here, and thank you for being here. This is not just important for me to hear some of your thoughts, but it's also important for her to hear some of your thoughts too. The Board of Education serves a really critical function in terms of supervising the superintendent, me, passing a budget, which is coming up in the next couple of months, and making sure that the school system's rules, our policy, are really pointing us in the right direction. So the things that we talk about tonight are going to influence things like the budget. They're going to influence our policy, and they're going to influence what I do as superintendent for sure. So this is the open mic night part of this evening. So I invite you to come on up and give a response to a couple of these questions. It's all right. Promise you, I don't bite. Oh, don't be shy. Come on up. Yeah, well, come on, YPP. Let's represent. You got this. Yeah. Thank you.
I made a deal with my friend that I would go first.
Fantastic.
If you would go second or third. And so, collaboration. I am Danielle Blocker. I'm a Silver Spring resident and also went to Montgomery County Public Schools all of my life. I went to Stonegate Elementary School, then Eastern Middle School in Silver Spring, and graduated from Blake High School in 2012. And I studied education in college. I think I got a really good education in MCPS. But even as a student at Blake High School, I did see a lot of disparities, racial disparities and class disparities. In terms of discipline, but also in terms of access to certain classes and certain things in the school as well. And so even though, I did really well in high school and was able to go to a great university, there were a lot of my classmates, particularly Black classmates, who were in-school suspension a lot for some more minor things. And it seemed like even though Blake was a very diverse school, who ended up in ISS or with some of those harsher punishments was a lot of Black students. And so now I'm working with students and parents really on school climate and equity. And it's disturbing that many years after 2012, we're still seeing the same thing, right? And so the county's Office of Legislative Oversight released a report on the school-to-prison pipeline last summer, showing that some of the arrests and other levels of discipline for certain incidents have gone down, but the disparities are still pretty stark, particularly for Black students, special education students, and particularly Black boys. And so I'm really glad that we'll be able to meet with you to talk about those things, and particularly making improvements to restorative justice and school climate, but would love to hear more from you if there are any other thoughts you have on approaches to some of that school climate and well-being.
Yeah, thank you. That was so good. Yeah, let's give her a round of applause. That was awesome. So the reason that that restorative justice is so important is because it works. It does. And I think some folks in school administration think that there's like an either or, when in reality it's a great tool in the toolkit, and it needs to be a part of every kind of repair to a relationship or repair to a situation. So I'm really excited to see that come to and flourish. Restorative justice is not new to MCPS. It's not. And there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of how that is managed in terms of its change management scope and creating some consistency among schools. One of the biggest challenges I think that large school systems like MCPS struggle with is this balance of like, are we a school system or are we a system of schools? And where's the balance or the tipping point between autonomy for schools and making decisions versus continuity and setting expectations and sticking to those expectations and having clarity behind that? I think one of the things that really helps with that is putting that data out there and being really crystal clear about what we're seeing and what's a real problem, and you have pinpointed those very expertly. And I don't think that we can own those problems or even begin to fix those problems until we see it with our eyes. So thank you very much. That's really good. Come on up, you were moving. I saw you. Come on. You move in your seat a little bit and then you get called out. That's how it goes. Welcome.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for being here. I actually attended another one of these presentations and I wasn't brave enough to get up, but I regretted it. So here I am. Today's my day. The points I'm going to make are not as important as the one that was just made, but they're things that other moms and I have talked about, and I thought it would be nice to just kind of bring it up here. So I have 4 bullet points I'll try to go through quickly. The first one is about textbooks. So our kids don't have textbooks. It surprised me as a new school parent, but I'm not here to ask for paper books. I can understand there may be reasons. I don't want to die on that hill. It'd be amazing, but what I don't understand is why the kids don't have even electronic textbooks. When my middle schooler studies for tests, it's this eclectic mix of logging into MCPS Classroom, and there's some slideshows and there's some videos, but there's no cohesive thing to study. And so some kind of like a PDF, with whatever we spend on curriculum, I would think that like a PDF textbook or something would be valuable for, study this chapter in science or history. And I think that without that, in addition to making it hard to study, you're kind of taking away the opportunity to read ahead, maybe in a class that might be more difficult, or even just the reading practice, because I think that was, growing up, like a lot of the reading wasn't just English class, it was reading your history chapter or reading, your science chapter. So that's my first point, is books. My second point relates to elementary school, and this may have changed. I don't have elementary school aged kids anymore, but I don't think I ever really saw them getting marked wrong for spelling and grammar. I think the idea was like, let's make kids feel good about writing, and I appreciate that, but I think you are, by not taking off points or making it part of a grade, you're kind of robbing the kids who would otherwise work to get the grade. You're kind of saying, well, learn it for the sake of learning it, and I think that's a high bar to set for kids who should really be getting like the fundamentals of, it's boring to study grammar, but I think it's valuable, because when you get good at something, that's when it becomes fun. Okay, that's my second point. My third point is more on the middle school level, and this is sort of a technical thing. So in middle school, you can take certain classes for high school credit, which I think is a great opportunity, certain math classes, foreign language. Those classes end up on your high school transcript, and this has gone fine for my kids, but I have friends whose kids maybe didn't do as well in a language class, and then it kind of follows them. Then you're suddenly a senior in high school, and when you were 11 or 12 years old and maybe didn't do well in Spanish 1, it's on your, and I think the answer I've heard is, well, it doesn't get calculated into your GPA unless it helps you. However, colleges will often just recalculate what's on your transcript, so I feel like maybe the option to have that stricken and just retaken for the credit that you have to gain would be a nice option for our kids to have. And that brings me to my last point. This is also related to foreign language, actually. When I was in middle school, Spanish 1 or French 1 or German 1, those were taken across 2 years. 7th and 8th grade, you got a really strong foundation. I think we kind of barreled them through a little bit fast to take all of Spanish 1 in 6th grade, Spanish 2 in 7th grade, or whatever, whatever middle school grade you do. It'd be nice to have maybe a longer and firmer foundation, because I feel like that would just be helpful. And that's it. Those are my 4 points. So thank you so much for coming. I appreciate the chance to talk about these things. Textbooks, please.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, because one other person, this is our 4th one of these conversations, and I've got a couple more after this. But you're the second person to talk about printed materials, or just even materials that are source materials. And I appreciate some of your comments that you're making about, like, the articulation of courses and in particular some of the transcript issues. Some of that's news to me, so I appreciate the new information. So thank you, appreciate it. Yeah, very good. Yeah. So while our next speaker's coming up, I will say that there's been some themes that have emerged at a few of the conversations that we've had, and themes that include safety, themes that include special education, and I really, invite anybody to share anything. I think it's great that there's even new topics being introduced. You'll see these things pop up in the notes that Mr. Cram over here is taking, and you'll see them pop up in the comments that get posted later. But very curious as to some more thoughts that you have. Armando.
Dr. Taylor, how are you?
Good to see you, sir.
My name is Armando Grundy Gomez. I'm with the Black Coalition for Excellence in Education. So I'm coming before you today to talk about something different. I appreciated that one of the parents when walking in and hearing that question. I thought that was, to your point, excellent. But it's also important for children to see themselves in the classroom. And so I'm going to come to you differently. I'm looking at some of the data where we have our unions that talk about how we protect teachers. But for somebody like me that has a Jewish background, we have in education the Holocaust being taught in school, things that affect communities. It's also important to talk about the diaspora of Black people in this place of space, to talk about what's happening and in the classroom. And also, when it comes to, we have teachers that don't want to necessarily look like, and that actually has happened, that don't want to teach children that look like me or some people in this room. And I think that's unconscionable. And I know you and I are coming from the same generation, both of us around the same graduation year. And I think it's interesting that we're still having these kind of conversations many years removed from Jim Crow, when our parents dealt with that, or our grandparents dealt with that. We're still having these conversations. It's just a new Jim Crow. So my question to you is this: how do we make an authentic and real move, regardless of the principals union, regardless of the teachers union, to hire Black teachers? And how do we make it less difficult? Because the numbers of Black teachers in the classroom is very low in Montgomery County. Over a $3 billion budget, but we don't have representation of Black children. And that's not something unique. That's many school districts. And usually, especially when it comes to Black men in this place. So that's my first question, and I'm not going to make many points. The other one is, when we have safety, and we're talking about safety, how we police communities, how we police children. The school-to-prison pipeline is a very real thing, but it's an even more thing in how our children interact with law enforcement. When you and I and some of us were growing up in school, they talked about officer-friendly, community-oriented policing. But our children are dealing with, we have some educators dealing fentanyl. We have a public town hall this week about safety. And so how are we in a real way going to look out, because targeting of children, especially Black and Hispanic children, that happens with law enforcement. And it's okay when we're in a town hall that's a diverse room and they talk about, we have community-oriented policing, we have all kinds of things that make it sound good and flowery, but it's also a real different thing when we unpack and extrapolate that data. So all I'm asking you is, one, how can we hire in an authentic way more Black teachers in the classroom so that children can see people that they can relate to and look like them? And also, how do we have a meaningful conversation about real safety in the classroom? Thank you.
Rich comments, for sure. Yeah, thank you very much, Armando. Appreciate that. Um, I wish I could solve both of those tonight, and I wish I had a magic wand to solve both of those challenges today for sure. Nationally, Montgomery County does better than every national average in terms of diverse hiring. However, there's a long way to go, and I will tell you that less than 1% of teachers are African American male nationally. That's brutal. It's an awful statistic, and I think that there are big strides that need to happen in general just to make the teaching profession attractive again. It's not. It has become a difficult career field to get into and to stay engaged in. I will say this, whenever you interact with an educator, please reach out and thank them, because I promise you, they are not there for the money. They are not there for the benefits. They are there for the kids, because they would not be doing this for the other reasons, for sure. It is a really significant uphill battle. So I think that societally we have some big hurdles to jump through in terms of trying to make this a really attractive career field for everybody. And I think that there's some barriers there. That being said, I think that there are some things that we can do. I think that when we invest in alternative benefits that look at things like housing, I think that we get a little bit closer to meeting the needs of diverse communities. We do. When we're providing access to social structures that are also supportive of diverse hiring, that improves our outcomes every single day. When there are affinity groups and networks to connect to, that makes a significant difference. Because we're not just trying to hire people to bring them into the field, we want them to stay, and we want them to be a part of a rich community. The very best outcomes that we get are when we grow our own. When we find people within the school system who possess a talent and a passion for working in a specific content area or working with young people, and we capitalize that and cultivate that into future teachers. One of the most untapped resources in this county in terms of future teaching potential are our para-educators. Phenomenal. They are doing the work. They may not have every single responsibility that a classroom teacher has, but they have many of the responsibilities, and that is a disproportionate population of color represented in our workforce. And what a great pool to harness and to lift up and to help support into the teaching field. And there's a number of things that I've done in other districts that I hope will be successful here as well, and that are worth the investment, is working with some of our partners to offset some of the expense of going back to school to get certified. Those types of partnerships yield a really significant benefit, and candidly, they create great teachers, because these are folks that are working with our kids already. They're already in the system. They got years of experience that are committed to the county, and it's a pretty seamless transition from that para-educator role to the classroom teacher role, and that creates great outcomes. I'm very excited about that as a prospect for us. We do a little bit of that now, but we could really be doing that on a much bigger scale and be very successful and mutually beneficial, because it not only lifts up our kids, where they get to see adults in the building that look like them, but it also lifts up a part of our workforce and gives them an opportunity to advance in their lives as well. Wonderful. Your second question about safety. Boy, I think everybody in this room would love to have a candid conversation about safety, and I'm going to tell you that we have already done one thing this evening that is going to improve safety at Paint Branch High School this evening. We got the lights in the parking lot to turn on. So when you go outside after this event, the lights will be on. Now, it seems like a small thing, but it's actually a big thing, because there's lots of different dimensions to safety in our schools. This is a brand new facility. It's 12 years old, but it's a new looking facility, and it certainly has a lot of the great attributes of a newer school. It's incredibly well constructed. It's very well maintained. It's well led. The kids and the adults in this building take care of their building and they love their school. It's a beautiful place. There's environmental safety. There is safety in walking the halls, and there's also a social and emotional safety that comes with having a positive sense of self. Those are all different dimensions of safety that we need to be mindful of. We very quickly gravitate towards physical safety, and if I send my kid to school, are they going to come home in one piece kind of thing? But there's lots of different pieces and parts that we need to think about when we think about safety. Some of the most significant things that we've already started doing this year that to improve safety don't cost a ton of money. They don't cost a lot in terms of a time investment, but they have a big impact. And it has to do with, do we have a safety and emergency plan that's effective? Has it been reviewed? Has it been practiced? Has it been followed through? And has it been tested to see if it's effective? And does everybody know their roles and responsibilities? If that's the case, those things tend to improve outcomes. It is usually small things that accumulate into a big momentum to keep a building safe. Ultimately, we want our kids, our parents, and our visitors to come into the school and have a sense of safety and then to actually be safe. And that's everything from the experience they have interacting with staff, the tone and tenor that occurs in the building and the culture and climate in the building, to are they physically going into a space that is actually safe, to what they pull out of the drinking fountain when they bend over for a sip. All of that matters. All of that contributes to safety. And so I think if we're going to have this bigger look at safety, we really need to look at it through more than one lens, not just through the physical safety lens, although that is really important. The best news that I have to share is that we've had a great start to the school year in terms of how our kids are in terms of their behavior. Come on in, welcome folks. In terms of setting expectations, in terms of follow through. Our suspension numbers are down, our number of critical incidents are down. Doesn't mean that bad things don't happen, because guess what? Teenagers don't always make the best decisions every day. You know, stuff happens on a routine basis, and when we've got 160,000 kids, that's 160,000 opportunities for something to not go well. And more often than not, our kids are doing pretty good. And I think that is because we've had kind of this renewed sense of setting expectations and follow through. The hard part for us this year is going to be, can we keep that momentum going? And can we keep our pressure on that point and keep that expectation up? And then next year, can we ratchet that up and set those expectations a little bit higher? I am still very troubled by the fact that chronic absenteeism continues to be a challenge for us. It shouldn't be. This should be a place where school is fun and engaging, but also rewarding for kids to be a part of. And yet we still struggle with chronic absenteeism. It's a big hurdle for us, so there's a lot of room for improvement in that space as well. There's a kind of an old saying in high schools, I used to be a high school principal, that no one is absent on game day. Because if you're absent on game day, you can't play. And so when our kids are engaged and when they're active in something and they're a part of something, and whether it's the chess club or whether it's the Spanish club or whether it's flag football or pickleball or whatever, it doesn't matter. If there's some kind of connection, or maybe it's the math club, you know, who knows? If there's some kind of connection and our kids are connected to the school in a meaningful way, the outcomes usually improve on a pretty dramatic basis. So, thanks. All right, enough of me talking. Come on up. Come on up. So you got here a few minutes late. It's totally okay. This is the part where everybody comes up and talks. And I've got a couple of prompts and a couple of questions where I'm asking about what's going well, what needs to be improved, how can we improve academics?
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Meta Sebia. I think out of the 3 questions, 2 of them answered. One question was about the para-educator. The other one is about homework. So my other question, I didn't go to high school or middle school. So I'm an immigrant. I don't know the U.S. middle school or high school or even elementary. But my daughter, she's gonna be 5th grade. I'm asking parents, but what does Montgomery County Public School has for parents to support them? They could have language barrier or even the culture, because now there's no homework. I'm like on the website trying to make my children busy, because after school they have activity, but they have time. And I think that's when we lose them. So I do support not only me in my neighborhood, we are having conversation, and homework is something that we really wanted to come. And you said share ideas. I went to a Catholic private school back in Ethiopia, so each of us used to be mandated to participate in different kind of activity, which help us to focus in our education. That way, there's no absence. So probably some of the activity, can they be mandated? So that's my comment. Thank you.
So much. Really appreciate you saying that. And I think you're right. We do lose our kids when it's almost like idle hands is not really what we're looking for. I would have to dig in a little bit more to learn more about that, honestly. But thank you. That's great. First things first, thank you so much for having the courage to come and speak and share your story. No one should ever apologize or be afraid of sharing their story or being concerned about airing something that has not gone well. So many of the things that young lady shared were so important. One of the things that resonated most with me is how she lost trust in the school and how she lost trust in the teacher who was serving her kid, and how she lost trust in the principal who was there to help her navigate a situation, and that they couldn't find creative problem solving. That's completely unacceptable. We need to do better. And as a community, I am so pleased that we heard her out together tonight, that we were there for her when she was distressed. She was obviously very shaken by the experience. Her child was very shaken by the experience. And we all need to be there to support one another. And when somebody is advocating for their child, we need to be there to be behind them as well. So what a difficult circumstance, and what tremendous courage to be here tonight to share. So I know that was tough for some folks, but believe me when I say that it's absolutely critical that she share that information, and that we get to the bottom of making sure that her child has the things that they need to be successful, and that she has the support that she needs to help navigate some of the complexities of being in a new place. She said she was an immigrant and that she was coming to the country and that she didn't know what the resources were. That's very confusing. And this can be a very confusing place. I will say you could spend your entire life in Montgomery County and still not be able to access some of the resources, which is its own problem that we need to address as a community. So thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for supporting a fellow community member this evening. Okay. We've had conversations about special education just now. We've had conversations about safety. We have a lot of critical things that are coming up. Come on up.
Hi, Dr. Taylor. So as you can imagine, I'm very shaken up. My name is Wylia Chase. You know, I lead the Black and Brown Coalition for Educational Equity and Excellence. Thank you for doing our town hall this Wednesday, the 23rd. You know, what this mom just shared is indicative of things that are happening across the county. And I would venture to say that I'm not familiar with the school, Charles Drew Elementary, but I would venture to say that something so heinous happening to her child that she's probably not the only one, but maybe she's the only one who's brave enough to come and say something. And I think that all the great sentiments in the world will not do anything to change the circumstance that her child is going through. And I've seen countless parents go through this, like I said, at different schools that I have witnessed in this county. And, you know, moving the child out of the school That's not the answer, right? And so what I would want to know, and I think what everybody in here would want to know, is what will be the repercussions to the principal and to the teachers who have harmed this child, and there should be an investigation at that school, right? And so, and I am hoping to hear resolution for that, right? Because I still haven't heard resolution for the N-word being printed on 1,000 sheets of paper at Wooten High School, right? Still haven't heard the outcome and resolution of the noose incident at Sherwood High School, okay? And so, right, and so, you know, Dr. Taylor, my oldest is 33 years old, right? Just like the gentleman who spoke earlier. And my oldest is 33, my youngest is 13. And the things that were happening when my 33-year-old was in this school system are still happening. And there's no reason for that. And so, of course, we're holding MCPS accountable, we're holding you accountable, but we're also trying to come with solutions. We want to be a part of helping things to get better for our children, right? So I was gonna come up here and talk about academics, but what I can say, and the last thing I'll say is, how can our children excel and achieve if they don't feel safe in their own skin in their schools where we, like the lady said, entrust our children more than 6 to 8 hours a day? And so these things need remediation. And I think that we have all the committees, we have all of these things, but still these things persist. Dr. Taylor, we really need a resolution. And our equity office, or our equity unit, I can't wait to hear your plan, your equity plan for this county.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's 3 things that I've got. So I'll try to unpack them in as much specificity as possible. Yes to absolute investigations of her situation, 100% that's absolutely merited and should happen, just as a consequence of really anybody having a similar concern. In terms of reporting out outcomes, no, we don't do that. Why don't we do that? We don't report out personnel outcomes because there are some legal protections for employees in terms of outcomes that are disciplinary. And we don't point out student disciplinary outcomes because they're protected under the Family Educational Privacy Rights Act. So that's a little bit of a disadvantage for us because, don't get me wrong, anytime that there is a clear outcome and a point when there's been wrongdoing, there would be nothing easier for us than to issue a press release and say, look, see here, this was the person that was the problem and we've resolved it. We often don't get that satisfaction the way that we would like to sometimes. In terms of how we would manage things moving forward and what do I believe in terms of the structure of the school system, I believe a lot of things. I believe firmly in this notion of Maslow's hierarchy of needs before you can even address some of the learning needs that happen in schools. So to that end, I don't think that hungry kids can learn. I don't think that kids that feel unsafe can learn. And I don't think that teachers that feel unsafe can teach either. I think that safety is a prerequisite to anything happening in the school district in a meaningful way. And that safety needs to be predicated on some pretty clear expectations that are fairly applied. That fairly applied piece tends to be a sticking point and a challenge for MCPS. Because what happens in one part of the county or one hallway or one classroom tends to differ from what happens in another classroom, and it's a real issue, and it's something that we have to focus on. One of the things that I think will help us is by calling out some of the data inconsistencies with disproportionate suspension, making sure that we are looking at the consequences that our kids have for similar or like interactions that are violations of the code of conduct, and making sure that we follow up on that and that there are consequences for the adults who don't administer those things in an equitable way. What do I believe about our equity unit and things that we can improve? I think that 2 things that I'll share today, and I think that there's a lot more to this, obviously. I think that I could do more for equity with a spreadsheet and a pen than has been done with the years of training and efforts that have been put in place by distributing resources in a very different way than how we've distributed resources in the past. That's number one. Making sure that our kids in various parts of the county have equitable access to different programs and different resources that they haven't always had access to. I think that some parts of the county that have access to an IB program over here, or this program over here, or that program over here, tend to gravitate towards specific areas. And you could probably assign a correlation based on some ethnic and racial demographics to some of those outcomes as well. That needs to change. Desperately needs to change. And that is going to have a financial consequence. We are going to have to retool some of our facilities to accommodate that. So what? It's the right thing to do. It's what we need to do. In terms of our equity unit and how it stands right now, I don't think that just training is going to solve our problems. I don't. And I don't think that a train-the-trainer model is the most effective delivery mechanism for training in the first place either. Because something kind of gets lost in translation along the way. That doesn't mean that we don't make the efforts that we're making right now. It means that we absolutely make the efforts, but we need to do them in a much more robust way than how we've done them in the past. And we need to look at equity through lots of different lenses, not just through one lens. So I think that there's a lot of work to do in that space. I look forward to elevating that work. It's central to who I am as a leader and central to what I've accomplished in the past and what I hope to bring to Montgomery County. So that's a lot. Come on up. We've been waiting for you. Thanks for coming.
So you kind of hit on some of the questions that I was going to ask,
Great.
especially about the programs in different places across the county. I have two elementary school kids, and it's very hard to find programs near where I live. I don't want to drive to Rockville. I don't want to drive to, Upper County. I want some programs in my community, and I feel that that has been a long issue, just not having the equivalence, everywhere, or equity everywhere. But I did want to ask more specifically about gifted kids. So I do have an elementary school student who's gifted and talented, and they are not in a third grade and above. They are not able to, do GT or some other programs that start at third grade. They have often been bored in school. Teachers are having a hard time to accommodate, the accelerated learning because they're dealing with other issues within the classroom. So I think we need to figure out a way to challenge those K through 2 grade kids so that they're not bored in class, and the accelerated learning from classroom or from school to school, it's not working. Luckily at our school, we were able to find a solution, but it shouldn't take one child to do that, and it took a lot of work to get that one solution. So that was my first kind of point. And I guess similarly, what would be helpful, I think, for some parents, especially me, when I get my children's reports, like the testing reports, I don't know what it means. I may get a percentage, like, okay, your child is whatever, performing, this percentage above other peers. But
Me either.
But what does that mean? And can we release some of that data? And I participated in some of the, I forget what the name of the committee is, gifted, something. But they said they have put in FOIA requests for this information, and y'all still have not provided it, which is a problem. So what else do we have to do to get this information? It just would be helpful. So I'm just going to stop there.
I have a funny feeling that before you get back to your seat, Miss Chase is going to track you down. Yeah, she's gonna try and find you, because I got to tell you, that's the same thing that she's been talking about. I will say that this is something I struggle with as a parent also, and I got to tell you, I got degrees in education, and I sweat some of this stuff, and I'm looking at it and like, how does this tell me how my kid is doing? You know, like what exactly do I need to know from here? And more importantly, like, what am I supposed to be working on with my kid at home? And as a matter of fact, Ms. Chase's group is actually working with the school system on with a group of schools to come up with some reporting mechanism that's in a little bit more plain English. I would love to see that expanded to a much broader scale, because I think that that is exactly what we need to be doing, is to have a little bit more clarity and a little bit better understanding. And I hate to say this too, because this is going to come across as maybe a little disparaging to the system, but I also think it will help educators with some of that clarity as well, and point us in a little bit of a direction. I think we have an overall understanding of what a certain percentile means in terms of growth and where someone's sitting in terms of achievement. But as a parent, I sit here and I'm like, should I be worried or not? And if I'm not worried, what do I need to do to support my child's passions and interests and move them in this direction? And if I am worried, what can I do to move them in the right direction? I'm right there with you. That's a great comment. Thank you so much. Come on up.
Hi, I'm Janelle Ryan, and I am an MCPS parent as well as an educator in MCPS for 27 years. My daughter attended William Tyler Page Elementary School, Briggs Cheney Middle School, and just graduated from Blake High School in the spring. And I teach secondary English. I started my career at Eastern Middle School in Silver Spring. I currently teach at Walter Johnson High School. So I could make many points about how things have changed over the years, but I'd like to try to hit on a couple of things that I think would improve student academic results. Having been with kids in the county and having one of my own, I just really think that, and I'm going to be speaking from the high school perspective mostly, but I really think that kids thrive on structure. And I think that over the past decade or so, especially, we have really removed a lot of those structures that give kids the accountability that they need. So I'll start with attendance. It really hit home when you said kids attend school on game day. We used to have a policy in MCPS called the loss of credit policy, whereby students who arrived late to class, for every, I believe it was 5 unexcused tardies, they earned an unexcused absence, and then I think it was after 5 unexcused absences, they lost credit for a course. So obviously that was a very generous policy, but it did limit chronic absenteeism because kids were being encouraged to come to class. You know, we're told a lot, you know, are you creating an inviting environment for learning? Do the kids want to come to school? Do they feel safe? And this and that. But the fact of the matter is, unless kids are given some accountability and really need to attend and are getting credit for that, I don't think that we're going to eliminate the chronic absenteeism. I would like to see a return to some sort of policy. You know, it used to be as recently as like a year ago, at least if kids had an unexcused absence, they weren't permitted to make up the work, and now we've even eliminated that. So kids who are absent, you know, for a day of class and miss a quiz or a test have to be able to make that up. So that's number one. Number two, I would like to see a return to final exams. I believe we eliminated them a number of years ago because kids weren't performing as well on them as we would have liked.
But that's the answer. Just get rid
yeah.
of it if it's not
So again, final exams create consistency. I really appreciated your comments about the lack of textbooks. Things are so inconsistent across the county. My English class is very different than the English classes my daughter took at Blake High School, and I'm not saying, you know, they're better or worse, but there's no consistency in this county. When we had final exams, we were all working toward an exam that every child in my subject was taking at a certain grade level. So that created consistency and it created accountability for my students, because at the end of the semester, they took an exam that was worth, I believe it was like 20 or 25% of the semester grade. And that was really helpful because right now, high school students, the only high school students that are really having access to 2-hour exams, which they might face in college, are students who take AP courses. So I really think that return to final exams that are consistent across the county is very important. And then the last thing I'll speak to is the equity issue, the equitable access to programs and curriculum across the county. You know, I teach at Walter Johnson High School right now, and we offer 6 or 7 foreign languages. You know, we offer like Chinese, we've had Farsi, we have Latin, we have Italian, in addition to things like, you know, American Sign Language, French, and Spanish, which are the standards. But my daughter, who is actually a Chinese adoptee, never had access to learning Chinese because she went to school in this cluster where they only offered Spanish at her middle school, and then at her high school they offered Spanish, French, and then finally they added American Sign Language. So I've always noticed the equity gap in regard to the foreign language, and I know that it's true in other areas too. So thank you. Thanks for coming. We appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, and thank you for illuminating some of those challenges. I will say that the first indicators of some really significant programmatic equity gaps usually appear in 2 places: world language, when there's usually only Western languages or a limited number of languages that are offered, and the other place is in the visual and performing arts. Now, that doesn't mean that inequities aren't existing in other places, but those are the ones that pop up very readily in most places. So I appreciate you illuminating that as a really significant challenge for sure. Did anyone catch that article in Bethesda Magazine or on MoCo 360 that was about you know, MCPS like losing its edge because of grading policy changes? Did anyone get a chance to read that? That was a pretty troubling article. And I gotta tell you, I read through it and I didn't see anything that was inaccurate, which was really even more frustrating. There's a tremendous opportunity for us to revisit some of those practices and for us to take a look at what makes sense. I will say the tardy policy that you referenced might be why I do not have a credit in Spanish 3. Because Senor Anisman was on the 4th floor at Bethesda Chevy Chase High School, not on the 1st floor where my other classes were. But at that same point, setting some expectations and holding to those expectations, I think, are critically important because our kids have figured out how to game part of the system. They have. And if they haven't figured out how to game part of the system, they are lucking into some metrics that have made it easier for them to pass by versus how to thrive and to actually attain the information that we really want them to get. So huge area of improvement for us, but good news. I actually think that that's actually one of the more fixable or easily fixable things that can position us a little bit better. I would say that this year has presented a great opportunity for us kind of ratcheting up expectations, for us to ratchet up expectations a little bit further next year and to make that a little bit part of it. So come on up. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. My name is Tiffany Kelly. You and I met when you came to the to MCPS's Anti-Hate Bias Task Force, and I asked you a question. I have to have 2 very distinct questions. The first is very simple. Restorative justice, the budget was cut. And restorative justice, at least how I've experienced it, is very helpful and really works. How it's applied can look different. There is no blanket. Can we look forward to an increase in that funding and also having restorative justice coaches at our schools?
That's a great question. I don't know is the answer, but I also think that there's a lot of things that we could maybe do differently that maybe don't require more funding but have a greater emphasis. And any opportunity that we have to place a greater emphasis on restorative justice as a tool, I think is actually better than funding per se. So I don't think that you need to fund something for it to be more effective. And I think that that's worth exploring. Like how we use something and how we leverage it may be more important than how much money we put behind it.
Okay, we'll see.
Yeah.
The second
absolutely.
question is a bit tougher, and I'm going to say this. I'm going to talk about my lens. I am a middle-aged black woman from the South. I am parenting a black boy. I am a descendant of generational poverty. And one thing people don't realize, if you look at data, well, they may realize it, but we don't talk about it. The highest rate of suspensions is free and reduced meal students. We don't ever talk about that. The worst academic outcomes, free and reduced meal students. I'm a trusted authority and a nationally certified facilitator on anti-poverty and economic equity. And this county has everything it needs to be sure that farm students graduate ready to do anything they want to do besides work a minimum wage job.
Amen.
They are not accessing the programs that will enable that. And I believe it is because, or I don't believe anything, I know it's because there's a specialized understanding that goes with understanding what people go through when they're in constant struggle.
Yep.
I did a training with MCEA, and those staff members stated we need more of what you're giving in our schools. MCPS really does need to get a handle on the outcomes, the horrible outcomes for students who are free and reduced meal. My son came into this county as a free and reduced meal student, and I am solidly middle class. Those challenges don't disappear because my income went up.
Right.
There are still barriers there that we have not readily worked to identify. And I would say that I would welcome an opportunity for us to really discuss that further because it is not on the table ever.
I love it. What a great segue into talking about two really specific things. So thank you. And I would say it doubles all the more when you add the layer of special education and students with disabilities. Yeah. So when you couple those together, it's almost exponential in terms of the negative outcomes predicted. So how do we do that? How do we unpack some of that challenge? I think that there's a couple of things. I mentioned earlier that I could do more for equity with a spreadsheet than I could with a year's worth of training, and I think that that's true. And I actually think that we can attack that problem by specifically providing some kind of equity add-on in terms of how we attack materials and supplies for farm students in all of our schools, knowing that the farms rate is artificially low because there are many people who do not complete the paperwork. Okay, that's one piece. The second piece has to do with any kind of program that leads to post-secondary outcomes that are non-college. And I'm gonna put out a challenge here, and I'm gonna ask all of our great career and technical education programs, what's missing? And I'm gonna tell you, I want you to think about it for a second. Our career and technical education programs, and here's what I'm mentioning, things like culinary arts, auto body, cosmetology, some of our traditional programs, and then even some of our more high-impact stuff like engineering. What's it missing? I'll tell you. What it's missing is a tool to monetize the skill set. Let's say you do 3 years in auto body. By the time you graduate, you are ASCE certified. You can work on electric vehicles, you can work on diesel vehicles, you can work on gas vehicles, but what you don't have is a business plan in your back pocket to work for yourself. An enhancement that really could separate Montgomery County from the rest of the world is taking our kids who earn these industry certifications. They're ready to go. They are ready to enter the workforce. They're ready to make an impact, and they're ready to make money for themselves and for their families. Except they're going to work for somebody. I want them to work for themselves. So I think that that is the bridge that we can build for our kids in some of those programs, because business ownership is the one-way ticket to bridge some of those poverty gaps. Absolutely. Oh, 100%. And it's all attainable, and it's all possible. So an entrepreneurship component to some of our programming, what a game changer that would really be.
And creating synergies and relationships with that.
Oh, absolutely. Now, I will say this. The one risk that we run is that all those wonderful internships may not want to offer things to competitors, but I'm okay with that too. That's good stuff. Guess what? You get to be our last speaker for tonight, so thank you, because I think we're running over.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
taking my concerns. My name is Monica Lee, and I am a teacher at Kennedy High School. I have been in the county since 2004 as an ESOL, now ELD, teacher. And I, too, like someone said before me, the other secondary English teacher, I believe at Walter Johnson, mentioned how things have changed and I feel like Montgomery County has lost its way compared to when I came into the county, where we were talking about Baldridge and keeping people accountable, and that went away in terms of my job, your job, our job, and we do need to bring that back. But looking at providing us with the tools we need to be successful, we use the map R, and I can't figure out why. As an ESOL teacher, it really doesn't give me enough data. It doesn't diagnose any issues that students have for anyone. You know, to say that the child is low in informational text or literary text, where do I go from there? You know, I need more, much more than that in terms of reading skills. I need to know what specific reading skills do I need to focus on for those students. Of course, I figure it out myself, but it would be better to have that diagnostic that we spend so much time giving to students, and I believe spend a lot of money on, to have a diagnostic that really identifies the reading skills that students need. And when it comes to fairly applying consequences for students, I think it would help if we look at the code of conduct and look at making it more detailed than what it is, because we have, even within schools, assistant principals don't all follow the same practices, so there's inconsistency even amongst them. And so we do need better language and more detail in the policy to make it more consistent across the board. With flexibility, I know with restorative justice, but with restorative justice, I would like to see more examples, more specific strategies and examples than what I've seen. I feel like restorative justice has been a policy and a philosophy more so than a practice in this county for us. In some places, I'm sure it has, you may have more than what I've received, but even in terms of training, it has been more of philosophy than more detailed strategies and what to do. And so I think there's a need there. And speaking of professional development, I think the county could use technological tools better to provide the professional development. I mean, sometimes professional development is lecture-based when it shouldn't be, but I don't understand why it's not recorded. I can go to certain external providers of professional development, and I don't have to attend, and they'll send me the video recording, or I can go back to their website and look at the video recording of that training that I want to attend. And many have been very useful, that they have had experts in the field to provide the training. So of course I want to see the video. So I think that a lot we could do to do more with professional development, such as bringing Studying Skillful Teacher 2 back, and doing it in a way that is cost-effective for the county by using technological tools such as our Canvas and video recording. Thank you.
God, you are so good. You go back and look at the professional development. I have never done that. You are so good. I want to translate a little bit of what her first comment was out of Education Ease. She teaches emergent multilingual learners. So a lot of folks that are in her class are coming new to the English language, and she is trying to scaffold some supports so that that there could be English language development. One of the assessments that we give is a growth assessment, trying to measure reading level at the fall, in the middle of the year, and at the end of the year. And she pointed out that maybe isn't the best assessment for her emerging English learners, and so for readers that don't have a strong command of basic English, that may not be a good resource and a good tool, and I thought that was great. I think you're spot on. I think it's very pragmatic. That's a great suggestion. The last, the middle point that you brought up I thought was also really good about kind of coming up with a structure for disciplinary consequences that has some flexibility, but also kind of some finite guidance. I think a lot of people mistake restorative justice as a replacement for a consequence. It should be with a consequence, but those things are to repair relationships and to correct some behaviors and some things that are going on with kids. It's a really powerful tool, but you're right. There's like this philosophical component. It needs to be married with a practical component, and that kind of marries up to one of the other speakers and what they were talking about in regards to restorative justice too. It's like, I don't think that necessarily we need to spend money on something to make it more important or to make it more of a focus or to lift it up in meaning. Doesn't mean that we don't spend more money on it too, by the way, but it just depends. But the idea here is like, if things that are important to us, they need to be a part of the fabric of what we do on a regular basis, whether that's having textbooks, making sure our schools are safe, making sure that our practices are followed with consistency. What a rich conversation this evening. I am so glad that you came out tonight. I am so glad that we had the opportunity to talk. I will say that I am pretty easy to get a hold of, but I'm a little slow on email these days. I'm a little backed up on the email front, but that doesn't mean don't email me. And I would love to spend some time talking further. If you missed an opportunity to say something and you really wanted to say something, please take a scan of the QR code and drop it in. This is really an opportunity to share your thoughts. You can drop this comment in or add a question or something along those lines. We'll put it up on the internet and we'll also respond to you as well. I really just thank you for taking the time to join us this evening and be here. Emotional, definitely rich, and important conversations. And I got to tell you, as a new superintendent, not someone new to the county, but as a new superintendent, you definitely have helped crystallize some thinking about what we need to be focused on and where we need to go in the future. And that really is at the point of a lot of this. I want to thank you for giving up part of your evening to be with me, and I hope you drive home safe now that the lights are on in the parking lot. Take care.